Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Super Stock live stream, March 30th, 2022. We are back with PharmaDrug, LMLLF on the over the counter for all our American friends, PHRX in Canada. Dan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Highly, it's been highly anticipated. Last week we ran into some technical issues. We're back here. I think hopefully we're gonna have a lot of good audience questions, today. And so what I'd like to do is, I think it's very important for investors to kind of really understand the upside. What I'd like to cover kind of today is the upside for investors to understand. If you don't mind, let me kind of start off with kind of my opinion, my kind of viewpoint, and from the investor viewpoint, and maybe if you want to add from the actual the science and the business side. But okay, so the way I'm looking at this is this. Our goal, of course, with at Wall Street Report with the next super stock is to bring investors those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside, right? So those are companies massive market opportunities, multiple catalysts built in at an inflection point. And what I always like to say is there's another variable, which is there's got to be a built-in upside. There's an edge, or the upside is built in. What I mean by that is either you have a great-looking chart, which has been completely de-risked, so it's like a massive double bottom for those people who follow charts, or you have something which is really, really deeply undervalued right now. It's deeply undervalued, so all you basically have to do is just sit back, even if the company doesn't do anything. Once the market picks up, the values come back, and you have a built-in 10x or whatever it is, or it helps you towards that 10x. So you have, I like to see things which are very, very, you have this asymmetric upside. So you have minimal risk, maximum upside, and what I'm seeing here is, and maybe if you want to add, is the biotech indexes, right? I mean, you're in the biotech space, right? No matter what you have, you're kind of beholden to the overall trends in the market, right? So tech stocks are down. We have biotech is down right now. The indexes are down 50% plus, and you have and they're at the bottom right now. I'm looking from a chart perspective. I just put something out on our Twitter saying, hey, the XBI has. It looks like it's actually breaking out. It's breaking out of the 50-day moving average. So we're going to start seeing, I believe, again, this is purely opinion, that the biotech market has bottomed out and is going to start moving up, which is going to lift all boats. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that, PharmaDrug, you have a built-in, I believe a 5x upside built in just on valuations. And here's what I'm looking at. Tell me if I'm wrong, or if you want to add, is that, in terms of valuations for biotechs that have similar type of assets that you have, a portfolio of similar assets that are, preclinical, which is where you are. You have four potential indications you're going after. You have big markets. They're usually worth about $100 million. They typically carry that type of valuation. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little more, but right around 100 million. PharmaDrug. What's the market cap right now? Fully diluted, it's like 15 million, 10 million?
15 million, yeah. I mean, I would add to that by saying that when we first picked up, cefarentine, the rights to cefarentine, which was by picking up Seiraya, which was just a little bit over a year ago, we just picked up the asset itself of cefarentine, and we've spent the last year moving that asset forward significantly, putting a coherent plan together, doing a lot of science, putting a development plan together, hiring the right people, meeting with the FDA, getting feedback from the FDA. We've done all of that, back to your point, while the biotech market was in contraction, right? And we've seen, more than 50% retraction in the biotech sector. And that was the time when we were adding value. So, I'm not going to talk about valuations here, but the reality is that I think that just normalization in biotech valuations should create some kind of revaluation of recognizing what we've done over the past year.
Right. So this is the key thing. I think the key thing is right now the stock is really deeply undervalued to based on peers, also the market. So there's a couple of tailwinds which are going to help out, right? But you're not just going to sit back. This is not what this is about. We're not going to sit back. And the reality is this. So let's talk about, again, which I'm looking for, the 10x upside, right? So in order to get that potential upside, the company, there has to be a couple of key points, a couple of key milestones that the PharmaDrug has to achieve, right? And we're going to get into that for a second. I'd like to also, because look, we have a lot of new investors who watch these live streams. So I want to clear up, there's a common misperception when it comes to biotech, is that the first thing everybody thinks is, oh, it takes, years to develop, 5-7 years, and then, it's a long time away, etc. And which is true, right? So, but the reality is it's just like very similar to mining exploration. We have a bunch of people who follow mining stocks, a lot of Canadians in our audience. So look, the reality is nobody really, starts doing the exploration to build a mine. Nobody goes into the mining business. I mean, 1%, as far as I know, right? It's very rare. Usually the idea is you find that you have an asset, you have a hypothesis that there's something valuable there, and then you do, whether in the mining business, you start drilling, you get the geologists and the drill results. As you climb that ladder of getting closer to proving that there's something there, the value increases. And same thing you have in biotech, right? So like you have this hypothesis that we have something valuable here, potentially worth several $1 billion. And as you de-risk, as you do the preclinical, then you start doing phase 1, phase 2, the value could potentially increase 30x by the time you get to phase 2. I mean, nobody is going to be holding the stock till you start, and you're never going to, as far as, tell me if I'm wrong, you're never going to actually
switching of hands usually, right? When
you're not going to manufacture the drug. You're not going to start. I mean, you're going to license it out.
There are people that buy only drug manufacturers, and there are people that buy the phase 3 to the manufacturing, and then there are people who buy from the earlier on to get to that point where there's a good chance that it's going to go into manufacturing, but we already saw that value creation that we were willing to take. The investment risk on, right?
It's just like with the mining sector. Like the real opportunity, the big upside is between the early stage and sort of as you're like, when you get, what is it, the 49, what is the 40 whatever the N49, whatever they're called, right? So same thing. In biotech, the real value is created
43101.
431, yeah. So the real value is created right around like phase 2. That's where you have the big upside. You can get 30x.
To cut in here, what you want to do is you want to find a company that's got this preclinical asset that has the lowest risk. There's always risk, but it has the lowest risk of getting to a phase 2, right? And that's where you want to. That's where you can make the most money in terms of risk reward in the biotech investing, right? And I think that we have that kind of asset, based on Cefarentine and its profile, and from many different aspects, and we can talk about that.
Okay, so let's talk about the first thing. So I want to, because again, let's talk about the main thing people need to know is, okay, how can the stock get closer to that potential, end value of 2 billion, whatever the number is, right? So the reality is, let's kind of back up to where we are now and how we're going to get to, let's say phase 1. So the key thing is this, right? Cefarentine, right? And maybe you can give us some of the data. This is not like some, novel compound which has no history, and we don't know the toxicity, and that's the key thing for the FDA, the safety data. That's the big thing that kills most drugs, is the safety and the toxicity. Cefarentine, can you talk about it, Dan? Tell us about the history and the safety data.
So we've talked about this before, but not some people are new here, and this is something that's extremely important to the story and why we are so excited about it. Cefarentine has been around for 70 years in Japan. It's been used for 70 years in Japan. That means that they already know what the side effects are and how toxic it is, and can it hurt you? And when it hurts you, how does it hurt you? And so the Japanese regulator has all of that documented over 70 years of data, and it's still being used, so they know it's safe. And so we're starting with a drug right now that has 70 years of safety usage. And of safety, not just of safety, but of usage, that people continue to use it. It's not, the drug's still being sold. So it's
multiple, which indications? Like it's got multiple
indications. Now, it was never used for more serious indications, even though people knew there were studies that showed it could be used for more serious indications was because in the pill form, which is how it's mostly used in Japan, because to go and use it intravenous, to sit in a clinic every day for 3 hours, you can't do that. So people take it in pill form. And the problem with the pill form was that it has very low bioavailability, 6 to 7%. So for every 100 milligrams you're taking, your blood's only getting 6 or 7 milligrams. So that made it actually quite weak. So, they used it for different things, from snake bites to, even at one point they used it for malaria. They used it even for alopecia. They use it for different things, but they never used it for serious viruses, and they never used it for cancer, even though they knew it had the potential to be used for that because of that problem with the bioavailability. What we have is the exclusive rights to the reformulated version. It was reformulated by a research house in the United States. It was reformulated. It was actually done for the US Army, but they didn't end up using it. Reformulated and enteric-coated, and this is patented. And so what that means is that they increased the bioavailability of it from 6 or 7% to 70 to 80%. So we're talking about a 10 times increase in potency. And the fact that it's enteric-coated means it gets to the right part of the body where it can absorb it. So what we have, and this has been tested out already, we know the bioavailability is 10 times higher than the pill that's currently used in Japan. Now we can say we can start using this for more serious indications potentially. And so that's the history with it. Now, we've already taken our version of the drug to the FDA in a pre-IND meeting. We went to them in September. We submitted it. We got the meeting results in November. And, we submitted it for COVID specifically, but the reality is that we were submitting the drug itself, because to get into a clinical trial, it's almost more important for the FDA to be comfortable with the safety and the caliber of the drug itself than what you're going to be using it on, because safety first. And so they looked at all of our engineering. It's called the CMC, the engineering, the chemical, the chemistry, the control, the manufacturing. You can produce a molecule in a lab. Doesn't mean you can produce a pharmaceutical grade pill. Because this was developed in a GMP research lab in the United States, they already had the capability of developing it in a pharmaceutical grade pill. So we took all that data and we submitted that to the FDA, and they were extremely impressed with it. We got thumbs up on it. Now, that doesn't mean it's ready, but what they did was that they gave us what we need to get ready, which was that produce. Sorry, you want to ask a question?
Go ahead. Go finish. Rod.
What we have to do, which we have already started, was we're producing that pharmaceutical grade batch according to what the FDA wanted. And we're going to do those tests that the FDA wanted. These are, off-the-shelf type tests. They're standard tests. We're going to do those tests on it. And we already know what the results are going to be. We just still have to do them in the standard way. We already know because of the history profile of the drug. And then we submit that to the FDA, and then we can use that for a clinical trial. So that's the critical path. And so we're on our way.
Yeah. So that's the big thing. So the big thing is to get to the clinical trial. Right now, the stage you're at is you're getting the drug manufacturer that you need for the trial, right? And this is going to take,
the GMP batch. Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is going to take production.
So this is going to take a number of months. I just want to add is that, originally the indication that you submitted that was you had the pre-IND meeting for was for COVID, right? And that's because cefarentine. So it has a couple potential uses. One of them has this antiviral kind of properties that it has, where originally, if I'm not mistaken, this was originally developed, like you said, it was for the U.S. Army for treating Ebola.
Yeah.
That's what.
We went in for COVID because that was the obvious thing to go in for. Now, that doesn't mean that we're moving forward with COVID, so nobody has to worry, oh, it's too late. No. There's two different tracks on here. We'll talk about the cancer after, but, we want to develop this as an antiviral. It's got a lot of studies that have shown that this drug is an antiviral. It is an antiviral, but it has strong potential for many different viruses out there. And so we it's been done for Ebola. It's been tested on Zika. It's been tested, in many different tests on COVID, which we have on our website and our press releases. We actually have citations for. It's been tested on SARS. It's been an array of viruses. It's generally an antiviral drug. And so we want to develop it for that. And so it's not just COVID, it's antiviral. And we know, like every few years, there's a new virus out there, right?
Is it possible that ultimately this could be just sort of like a general antiviral drug? I mean,
yeah, definitely. You always bring it down the line, down the path for a specific virus, but that doesn't mean that once it's approved for that virus that it can't start being used for different viruses, right?
Right. So, okay. Now, so basically, so you have, okay, so this thing, very important. It's got this, kind of track record, safety history. So again, I think that de-risks it to a great degree. Again, it's not like something where, you're going to be 3 years out into the phase, even maybe the phase 1 trial, and then all of a sudden there's toxicity. This is, anything could happen. I mean, you never know, but it's unlikely. Let's just say it's highly unlikely.
These tests already, first of all, the drug's been in use in Japan for 7 years, like we've talked about. But outside of that, there's been lots of toxicity tests done by us, by the people who have actually developed, our version of the cephalosporin. They've done toxicity tests. Other, academic institutions, scientific papers have done toxicity tests. So we're comfortable with the toxicity. That doesn't mean that you don't have to do the FDA, approved, required toxicity tests on the lot that we're producing to go into a clinical trial. We have to do those tests, but we're comfortable with what the results are going to be because it's already been done, right?
Okay. So meanwhile, okay, so here's the thing. I think this is the key thing for investors to kind of focus on, and we'll open up for questions in a little bit. Right now, you have a number of, kind of lab trials going on for different indications. So you work on other potential indications for, where PD-001, which is, your platform, which is the cephalosporin, your reformulated cephalosporin, PD-001. So you have it right now for, you're developing it for prostate cancer, esophageal cancer, right? And what else? What else do you have for? Then you have the viral, right? And we'll talk.
So 3 right now.
3. Yeah. The DMT is separate, but in the meanwhile,
we could talk about maybe another day or later on today. DMT is a separate thing where we got
a separate issue.
We got 2 tracks that we're working on, but really, what I really want to focus on here is cephalosporin today because that's the one that
let's do that. Yeah,
I think cephalosporin transcends whatever trends are going on in the biotech market, right? And so that's the one those are the 3 tracks for cephalosporin right now. But the viral can be more tracks than 1. We don't know. We're going to do some more work on that. But we already have an antiviral track, and we have 2 cancer tracks, the lead one being esophageal cancer. We already have orphan drug designation on that. And the second one is prostate cancer, and we're developing that. Now, there's a difference between the 2, and we could talk about that. There's already been studies done on esophageal cancer, which is how we were able to get the orphan drug designation. Not going to get orphan drug designation if there isn't already science showing that this drug can be used potentially for esophageal cancer.
Okay, so that's
there wasn't anything for specifically grouping cephalosporin with chemo for prostate, which is why with our results, we've filed for provisional patents. So those are 2 separate things, 2 different strategies we're working on that are both cancer. Okay,
so we're going to dive into those in just a second. I want to really get deep into those right now. But the idea is that right now, over the next couple of months, right, is that I guess the goal is to develop this like really robust lab data, which could which is going to do 2 things. One is going to support future clinical trials that you're going to be doing in the next year or so. Also to identify potentially new indications, right? Other cancers that you could be going after, other other things, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. So I mean, the way I think people should look at this is that there's a timeline or there's a process. There are steps that we need to take to get to the clinic. We have started those steps, and they're very precise, coherent steps that we have to take, which starts with the manufacturing of the pharmaceutical grade, the GMP lot, which we've started manufacturing. Then after that, stability tests and these toxicity testings and so on. And those are the steps. That's the critical path. in terms of getting us to the clinical trial. In the meantime, we already know that we have a lead indication, which is esophageal cancer, and we have prostate, we have viruses. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, let's continue to build the strength in those different sectors or just different indications to bulk that up to make us even more powerful when we go into the clinic, or to even, look, we may decide we're going to take esophageal. The other two may look great, and maybe we license off the other two with strategic partnerships. But the more we build up in the meantime, the more we put ourselves in a position of strength to choose the best one, which right now we're saying is esophageal, but as the work gets done, we'll see which one at the end is the best one. And then the other two, if they still also look almost as good, we can do strategic partnerships with other firms.
Right. So the key thing is this, right? So right now, this lab data that these studies that you're doing, any one of these, I mean, you could, number one is going to obviously support, the upcoming trials, but any one of these, I mean, you may have some incredible data, which you've already shown some pretty incredible data for the prostate cancer. Yeah. You've shown some, so I mean, you can show some incredible data, which is going to, number one, attract potentially other pharmaceutical partners. I mean, so in other words, people need to understand that there's a lot of value that can be created, and any one of these studies can, increase the value of the company by, let's call it 5x.
Potentially. I'm not sure how much. It depends on the market conditions and who the partner is and things of that sort. But look, the reality is this, we've already added more value by the tests that we've been doing with prostate cancer. We've already filed for provisional patents. We're going to be doing more work on that to bulk that up. We've started the animal tests on esophageal cancer. So we'll be getting those. We're also going to get the final results because we give you interim results on prostate cancer. And we're going to be bulking up the virology as well. And, we may have already started talking to some kind of institution on one of these indications. I don't know if it's going to turn into something, but, these things do happen. And so that's what I'm trying to, I think that a point that needs to be made here. While we're progressing on that critical path on developing that pharmaceutical lot of sufferentine that gets us ready to get into the clinic, to get into a clinical trial, and obviously we're going to have to take one of the indications. We're going to be bulking up these indications, and we're going to be getting news releases and press results and developments along the way, right? So it's not like you're waiting for the
this is right.
I think development along the way where we have more cancer on the prostate results coming. We have esophageal animal results coming in a month or so. The prostate ones are coming sooner, the final results. And we got virology that we're working on. And these are all things that just bulk up the path, right? The path is already going.
Very similar.
Let's bulk it up, right? Increase the caliber of the portfolio, right?
Yeah, I guess very similar to anybody who follows mining. It's like, as you get more drill results, which prove, show, the data, the value of the asset increases as
you may only need 1 million ounces to get yourself a real mine that's economic. But as you're working towards getting that final engineering study that's going to let you build that mine, there's nothing wrong with letting you go from 1 to 2 or 3 million ounces in the meantime, right?
That's right.
So it's that type of thing. Yeah.
This helps because we get a lot of mining people here, so this helps them understand the upside.
So, or you have a 1 million ounce deposit and you're already working on the engineering to build that mine, but right next door to it there's another little patch, and you're finding another 1 million ounces that it's right next door that you can tack onto it, but it's not, you don't need it for the first million, but you're still adding value, right? So
I guess
there's a 2-dimensional way or a 3-dimensional way of adding value to the story here, which is we're moving towards a clinical trial.
It's the same.
And we're adding value to how many clinical trials we could potentially do, right?
Yeah, it's like mining, whether it's mining or drug development, it's the same thing. It's basically exploration. It's a science-based exploration. You're in the business of exploration, basically, right? So the main thing, I think what Dan, if I could, what you were basically saying is that the bottom line is there's going to be a lot of kind of upcoming news flow and events, which could impact the valuation of the stock in a positive way. So any of this lab data, any of the potential new indications, which could come out, I don't know, in the next, could be next week, could be a month, whatever it is. But
we have stuff coming in the next few weeks. It was a good time to come back today because although we had a little bit of a lull in press releases because you get a batch out and then you get a lull and then you get another batch out, and we haven't necessarily put much out since the last time I was on. I think it was good to come back here and just give some better perspective on what's really going on here and to prepare people for what the next batch is. And it's that there's going to be more, final of prostate first, animal study. We're going to have, esophageal study coming in a month or so. And we're going to have some virology potentially coming. We're going to have the continual development of the sufferanty. That's all news flow in the next 1 to 2 months. And it's not news flow for the sake of news flow. It's actual development and moving the story and the asset forward. So there is a lot on the come here.
Yeah. So, okay. So before we get into questions, I just want to do two things. And we'll get, okay. So let's kind of get an update. Let's just a recap for anybody that's new. Maybe give us like a high level summary of, the studies that you've done for, esophageal cancer and also prostate cancer. For those,
so if we go back and just do a quick
and the market opportunities, etc.
Right. So what we did with the first, we started with in vitro, which is, in the dish. So we took sufferanthine versus chemo on 60 different cancers. And so we wanted to do this broad, it's something we probably want to do in virology as well. Let's test, many viruses and just, cast a big net. Although our focus was esophageal cancer already, we felt it made sense to just be methodical and do that. So we did 60 cancers. 20 of the 60 cancers showed that sufferanthine had an actual significant impact in the dish, but still had a significant impact versus chemo, equal to or even greater. But what the best thing was that esophageal cancer specifically showed at on an equimolar basis that that it was 5 times more powerful than the chemo. So that was huge for us. Then we did a second in vitro test, which this time, instead of just doing chemo versus sufferanthine, we did chemo, we did sufferanthine, and then we did sufferanthine and chemo combined together. Is there synergy between the two? And so there, again, esophageal cancer turned out being the best one by far. Again, about 5 times as strong as chemo. But the combination effect wasn't that significant, but it was still very significant. But where we saw a combination effect that was very significant was with prostate cancer. And so we kept our mouth shut on what it was at first, but we mentioned that it was a specific cancer. And then we filed a provisional patent on it. And then we announced that it was prostate cancer. And then we started the animal tests. And then the first one was prostate cancer. We started on prostate cancer because esophageal was more important, to be honest, because we wanted to test out, using our sufferanthine in the mouse. And, so while we were looking at the ability of sufferanthine and chemo to work together, we also threw in the sufferanthine alone as another test for toxicity, because the more you can test the toxicity, the better you are. And it was great because in those results, the sufferanthine had no toxicity on the mice. That was significant. But what was very interesting here is that after the 21 day of dosing, and then you let it rest for 7 days, but the 21 days of dosing, and those are the interim results that we put out, the combination of sufferanthine and chemo together had a significantly higher tumor reduction.
What was the number that you have?
I forget what it was. I forget offhand. I had it last time. I think it was like 60 or 64, some huge number. It was more than 50%.
Almost 70%, I think.
Yeah. Something at 64 maybe it was. But it was a significant reduction in the tumor size. Now the dust settles. Now we analyze the data and we'll put out the final data. But now the way in which we can, we know that there's efficacy there. But now other ways in which we can add to this and say, okay, well, now that we know that it can reduce the tumor size, maybe we can change the dosing combination. Maybe we can also look to lower the bad effects of chemo, right? Because that wasn't our goal. We were just looking to see if we can reduce the tumor size. Now maybe we can redo it and say, hey, can we also focus on reducing the bad effects of chemo? Because chemo, we know, is extremely harsh on the human being. So that's the ways in which we can do more tests, not to see if there's validity in it, but to adding power and value and data to the asset. So that's an example of another test we might do, but that doesn't change the fact we already have an animal study that showed that combining the two had an increase in tumor reduction.
So each of these studies, so each of these studies, really adds value to the asset, right? So, and you have more. How many studies do you have? Do you think do you have right now planned or coming up between now and?
Right now. We have 2 that are actually ongoing right now.
Ongoing right now. Okay. So let's say between now and, it's probably going to take you, I don't know, let's call it 6 months to get the batch of the drugs for the trial, right? To get for the clinic.
It's going to take 3 months to produce. It's already starting producing.
Okay.
It's going to take 3 months to produce. Then we got to get that final product with the enteric coating. But then we start immediately doing the, as soon as the 3-month part is the actual substance is done, then we start the stability testing and start working on the toxicology and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, while we're doing all of that, we have 2 tests that are live. We have one that we already gave the interim results on, and we're going to get the final results on soon, which is the prostate cancer. We got esophageal cancer. We got another one that's unnamed that's coming out soon. And
what are those? Okay, so when can we? What's the timeline? When do you expect that data to come out?
Next month or so.
Next month. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there could be some. Okay. So bottom line is for investors, there could be some data in the next 4 to 6 weeks, which could have a potential upside impact on the stock.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A catalyst.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, esophageal is our main cancer, and this is our first animal study on esophageal cancer. There's been other animal studies done by other people, so we feel comfortable, but it's science, right? And so this is going to be our first purely focused on esophageal animal study, and that's coming out next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. So this is a key thing. Dan, I think the reason why the stock is where it is right now, why there is an opportunity, why there is value right here, potential value for investors, is that right now, you have what could be, again, it could be $1 billion plus opportunity. However, you don't have the stock. The stock trades in Canada for the most part. You don't have any there's no institutional following yet for it. And usually those guys, they don't come in at this stage. They usually come in after, let's call it, as you get pre-phase 2. So like this is that stuff is a year out, right? But the problem I believe is that there is a perception with retail investors in kind of at this level is that, nothing is going to happen for a year and there's no value. No, the reality is there is value. There's multiple catalysts right now that blow the stock up to potentially 10x, which is based on data.
I think there's a lot on the come.
So I just want to so I would just So let's get to some. I should answer this question. This is when will we see increased volume on the American market? That's my fault. Dan, I apologize because we actually have not really started our American marketing yet. I mean, on the Wall Street Reporter side, we really haven't started doing what we do in terms of tracking the U.S. investors, because that's and we're doing it for other Canadian stocks, and we see massive volume increase. We plan to do this. We talked about this earlier today, and that is going to kick off next day or so, possibly tomorrow. But you're gonna. I think you're gonna start seeing volume and liquidity in the U.S. Starting this week, next week. You should start seeing a lot. Let's put it this way: a lot of U.S. eyeballs on the stock, just like we're bringing U.S. eyeballs to all the other stocks, where the volume went from 0 to a lot of volume. The question though is the U.S. ticker. You guys got a good point. Can you get a better ticker than this? What do you call this? LMLLF?
We can work on that. Sure. Definitely.
Something more like PHRX. That's a good ticker.
I think there is one. That's why we didn't do that. When we changed to PHRX, there was already one on the OTC. So we can look for another one. Yeah.
Interesting thing. So Jean-Pierre is asking, any bigger buy? Question related to this. When do you think? I mean, I know you're probably in early you're probably always in conversations with potential partners or whatever. But at what point do you see value in bringing in maybe a development partner or some sort of?
I think it would make sense to get into a clinical trial by ourselves, realistically. Now, once you get into a clinical trial, whether it's phase 1 or phase 2, definitely. everyone starts looking at you. And that's why, Jack and I started talking about this earlier, where, at what point do you potentially, license off one of the other indications? And my answer to that was, it'd be a lot more powerful to license off one of the other indications once we already have ceforenthine itself in a clinical trial, because then you de-risk their ability to get that indication into a clinical trial, because you already showed that it's in there, right?
Okay, so meaning, let's say, maybe let's say you're in, let's call it approaching phase 2 for esophageal cancer.
And
so
then a new virus hits the market. And we already have evidence showing that, we have potential to use ceforenthine for that. Maybe instead of us taking that into a clinical trial for that virus, maybe someone else comes. Could be a large company, could be a smaller company. Someone else comes and does a deal. Okay, we're going to take the ceforenthine and we're going to take it into a clinical trial for the virus, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, look, the biotech, the drug development business, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing going on, because essentially all of these things are assets, right? And depending on what happens in the market, you might want to keep one, license out another one. It's a very fluid situation. Yeah. The good news is, I think, which people should keep in mind, is, let's say you get to phase 1 for ceforenthine for esophageal cancer, prostate, whatever it is, right? And you mentioned there's constantly new viruses. Every few years. We had COVID. That was the big one. But you remember? I mean, as an investor, I remember when Ebola first popped on the market. Any stock that had anything to do with Ebola went up 10x. You had Zika, anything. So you have basically you have an ace up your sleeve with there's going to be another virus, and when there is, people are going to be looking for virus stocks, and you have it.
And we have it. Yeah.
So
and we're not just going to wait. In the meantime, we'll build up the science for its use as an antiviral. In the meantime, we're going to do that. We're going to keep moving that forward. As we move forward, the ceforenthine for the cancer, we continue to move the virus forward, so that up our sleeve is become, it goes from a jack to an ace, right? And so that's part of our strategy.
And listen, I mean, historically, PharmaDrug, right? I mean, over the years, I mean, you've done well, basically, with other assets, like finding things that are undervalued and making a significant upside when things picked up in terms of, I think, stock assets, etc.
Yeah. So
I think we could see, something very similar happening with, I think the virus thing potentially is a big one. I just want to touch on DMT since we're talking about, and then we'll get into some. So you have a total of 4, potential indications you're going after, 4 assets that you're developing. You have the 2 cancer assets. You have the antiviral, which is sort of that ace up the sleeve. And then you have something which is really interesting, which is you have the glaucoma asset, which is DMT, for treating glaucoma. Can you again just a quick recap for anybody new what mechanism?
We got some good developments on come there too. So essentially, we decided to go into psychedelics and decided to take a real biotech approach to it. We don't want to go after neuropsychiatric indications, not because there's no use for it or there's no validity to it, but there's so many people already doing it, right? And so we said that we believed in psychedelics. We believed in the whole concept of it being something that's naturally in the body, specifically DMT, and that it can actually it can have a real use for something outside of neuropsychiatric. And that's where it was actually our chief scientific officer who said, let me go from grassroots, let me go bottom up. What are different, receptors in the body that can respond to DMT that we've seen in academic studies? Because, there's been some academic studies done on DMT, and he stumbled upon glaucoma. And the reality, there was an actual pharmaceutical company in the 90s that looked to use the DMT for glaucoma, but they ended up hitting a wall because of the method that they were using, and they dropped it. And that's where we came up with the idea. So we decided to go after it. So there's 2 receptors, serotonin receptors in the eye that can help with intraocular pressure. And that's the nerve pressure that builds up in glaucoma that causes the blindness. So you want to have a medication that reduces that pressure. And so there are medications out there, but they come in the form of eye drops, and they sting and they hurt, and people forget to put them in, and maybe they don't want to because they sting, and all those types of things. So we came up with this idea. Let's find these different versions of DMT, make it more, take DMT, but reformulate it to make it more applicable to put directly into the eye. And so we came up with 6 different molecules. We narrowed them down to 2. We actually ended up adding a third in, which wasn't our formulation. It's a known formulation. We added it in as well, but we ended up kicking it out. But we tested it in the eye, in a dish, in actual cells from the eye, from human eyes. And we've already had our first batch of results. We found that there wasn't toxicity with either of the 2 molecules that we're looking at. And secondly, we found some real significance in terms of the impact on the receptor and being able to potentially reduce that intraocular pressure. So we're going to keep doing that. And at some point, we'll do an animal test, but we have some more tests that we're doing there. We'll talk about that as we have results soon. But at the same time, we're also working, we're doing this with Terasaki Labs. We're working to develop, and this is the clincher here, an actual device that will have a controlled, consistent release of that molecule directly in the eye. So you don't have to keep putting drops in every day or 3 times a day. The other thing as well is that when you're sleeping, you don't put drops in. Well, that's one of the problems with glaucoma, is that the pressure builds up while you're sleeping. And so, what if you had a device in your eye where it was there for 15 days or a month or a week or whatever, we haven't decided what time frame is, but something along those lines. And then it consistently, in a controlled manner, releases that substance that we know has an impact on the intraocular pressure. Then you get your cake and you eat it too, right? So, we love that from a standpoint that, if we have our own formulation and we have our own delivery mechanism, then you can really truly patent it, right? And then you have an actual device that can help, although like I said, there are medications for glaucoma. Many people go blind every year from glaucoma, and it's a massive market. And we believe that we're developing something, unique there. We have one of the top doctors, if not the top doctor for glaucoma in Canada, working with us. She's extremely impressed by the data we've seen so far. She's behind what we're doing, and she's going to help us develop this. So we're working with a world-class lab, Terasaki Labs, working with, we believe, a world-class glaucoma doctor in Canada, and our chief scientific officer, and we're developing a unique product here.
Okay. Dan, let me ask you this: in terms of, you have 4 different assets, really. So the cefarentine, you got 3 indications you're going after with cefarentine.
Yeah.
In terms of DMT, is that a core focus, or do you see monetizing that asset at some point? In other words, because that could be, as you get some maybe more lab data, or as you kind of get closer to clinical trials, etc., that could be, a substantial asset. It could be worth more than,
if you put a gun to my
the value of the company right now, for sure.
If you put a gun to my head and you made me choose one, I would probably choose cefarentine and esophageal cancer. Now, that being said, I love all 4, and I want to continue all 4. But if we're lucky enough that all 4 progress significantly, then we're not going to keep them all together.
I guess that's what I was.
That's the way of answering it, right? I don't have like a specific path that I'm going to tell you. A year from now, I'm going to sell the DMT. I don't know that yet. Let's just progress all of these assets along. But yes, if a year from now, all 4 of these have progressed significantly, that's too much for us to just hold in our hands. We're going to have to hive some of that off for sure.
Yeah. So does that, again, I think that's another, potential catalyst for the stock, is that, as some of these assets kind of advance, in the lab or in the clinic, the value increases, and, it might be potentially, again, it might be a better fit for another partner who's willing to pay a lot of money for it, as in the licensing, and you focus on. And we don't know which one yet. We're still in the early stages right now with both cefarentine and with DMT. Well, I think cefarentine has a much, is that a fair thing? A clearer path, or no? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I like I said before, what I said right at the beginning, I think cefarentine's got, as much as anything in preclinical is risky. I don't want to, shy away from that. I think that cefarentine is very unique in its sense of how de-risked it is for where it's at. So yes, I think that's the clearest path, is sufferentin.
Okay.
And I think that because we have esophageal cancer as orphan drug designation, and that means not only do we have that special status with the FDA, but that means that there's research that's been done specifically for esophageal cancer before us, that's the safest path and that's the clearest path. But I think all of them have potential.
Okay, let's get to some audience questions here. How do people sign up for the DMT glaucoma trials?
Oh, that's you can't, not yet. We're a long way away from doing actual human clinical trials for glaucoma and DMT. First, we got to finish the preclinical in the dish, which we're in the midst of finishing. We got to finish the prototype, which we're working on already. Then we got to do an animal test. Then we got to go to the FDA. So that's going to take some time. And at that point, it'll probably be known if we ever get into a clinical trial. How to sign up.
Okay, so this is good. So let's kind of Dan, let's kind of recap here. Just key milestones. What can people expect from the company next? Let's call it 60 days, right? What milestones are coming up in the next 60 days, which might have an impact, potential impact on valuation?
Well, definitely updates on all three aspects of the indications for sufferentin, and the continued development of sufferentin itself. From the production standpoint. So that's what we have going on with sufferentin. And on the DMT side, like I said, we got more results coming and updates on the development of the prototype.
So we can expect to see what kind of news flow
I think over the next, I think we got 3 to 4 press releases over the next 5 weeks, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So 3 to 4, important announcements, potentially important announcements.
Yeah.
A month, which is good.
Yeah. Usually what we do is we have a batch of results and then there's a lull and then there's a batch of results. And I think there's been a little bit of a lull here and we're setting up for a batch.
Well, right. That also we should say that, because the reality is, it's you're kind of beholden to the science, and as the science progresses. So you might have a lull at some point, but you have a couple of things. Okay. So
I get pulled on here and then everybody's like, when are you putting out press releases? And I always answer and I give a number, and I shouldn't be because there was one test that we were supposed to put out the results a month ago, and something happened with the lab and something went wrong, and it had nothing to do with the results. It had to do with some technical issue, and we lost a month. We lost 5 weeks, so that press release couldn't come out because the result didn't come out. And
it's the same. It's just
the next week or so, right?
It's just
you can't control. You can't really control. These are
right.
It's like what I have planned, but because it's science, things go wrong. Yes.
Right. It's like in the mining. You may have to wait for the assays to come back. There's things that you can't control 100%.
Yeah.
So, but there is okay. Let's kind of wrap up. Dan, I asked you this before, but just our favorite question here. In your opinion, what would you say is the top 3 reasons why investors should consider PharmaDrug right now?
I think that you have a very de-risked, as much as it can be, de-risked path from a preclinical to a clinical, number 1. Number 2, you have several different indications, number 1, number 2. And number 3, I think you have a true biotech approach to psychedelics, which, even though they're not so in vogue right now, could always come back in vogue. And I think that our approach to it is a true biotech approach that can continue to develop and evolve, even if psychedelics don't come back as a theme. And so that's a third reason why I think people should own this.
And that's a reference to the DMT. The DMT. I think psychedelics are actually coming back. I mean, it's actually we're starting to see some of those stocks starting to pick up. The biotechs are picking up.
Look, the last thing I'm going to say here is, and we said this at the beginning, I'm not the CEO, I shouldn't be talking about valuation, but I will make the statement that I do believe that we added significant value while the biotech sector was going down, right? And so I think that just the normalization of the biotech sector should, I think, give us some value for what we've done in the meantime, which was, the coherence in our path with the sufferentin, the first test results in the dish, the second test results in the dish, the first animal results, the pre-IND results, the fact that we've started manufacturing the GMP law, all that's been done while the biotech market's been crashing. And so that's significant value that we've added while the market's been crashing. So I think a normalization in biotech should let people appreciate what we've already done.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is, for, any investors watching. Look, I mean, we've had a lot of stocks, that have, gone up, 10x, 20x, 50x, whatever. And, they all have a certain common factors in place. And, in terms of those built-in catalysts, all things, and PharmaDrug really has, all those key ingredients. I mean, so it's just a question of, things in the kind of the stars aligning over the next, I think, few months, whatever it is, where we can see, potentially that type of upside. So, on that note, Dan, I'm going to let you go, get back to work, back to the lab, and hopefully we can see some, some significant news, coming days.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Take care, everyone.
Next one.